Hello everyone and welcome to this stream on Substance Designer 2017.2 new features. So first I just want to thank everyone for joining us here today. So if you didn't hear already, yesterday we released a new update to Substance Designer 2017. It's the 0.2 release. And so here in this stream we are going to just run through the features. So yesterday we also released just a few small tutorial videos that just kind of go a little bit more in depth into some of the nodes we're going to discuss. So we have those on our YouTube channel as well. In this stream, what I'm going to do is just kind of run through just pretty much everything that we have. And so yeah, it's going to be fun. And again, thanks for joining us. Now, before we get started, one of the things that I wanted to do was just give a special shout out to the designer devs that are back in Clermont-Ferrand in France. So those guys are awesome, and they did a really great job on this this new software release. So I just want to give a special thanks to them. Also, a special shout out to Nicholas Werman. He is the product manager for Substance Designer. And so Nicholas created a lot of the nodes here that we're going to be showcasing in this stream, and he does just a really amazing work. And so again, just special shout out to those guys. All right, so with that said, let's just jump in and get started. All right, so here we have Substance Designer, and I've got a lot of bullet points to kind of run through. So what we're going to do to start here is just, just kind of ease into it a bit. So I'm just going to look at some new features in the application. So just small little things. So to start here, we've got our graph view that we have here at the top. And one of the things that we added to this graph view is a little icon here to the top of the toolbar. It's this little camera button here. And what this will do is it will take a snapshot of your graph, and you'll notice here the little tooltip says that it's going to be at 1:1 resolution. So yeah, it's going to just take a snapshot of this. So you just click the button, and then here you can choose where you want to save this, any file format or whatever. And like I said, it just saves a snapshot here of your graph. So just real quick, if I just jump over to, say, Photoshop and take a look, here's what we have. And so the image that gets exported, you can see it's got transparent background. If I zoom in, we can see a huge rundown of all the nodes. So, this is good if you're making kind of like chart diagrams of different techniques and stuff, or if you want to share, if you're sharing your work in your portfolio, like say on ArtStation or something like that, you want to include the graph. We now give you a really nice 1:1 resolution of that screenshot. Again, with transparency, you can put any background behind it that you want. So it's just a pretty widely requested feature, and we just wanted to make sure that we supported that. So there's just a small little feature to the graph. Another thing that we have here in the 3D view, so if we just look, we've got our 3D view. We've added a new state system, basically. So here underneath scene, you'll see that we have, create 3D resource from current scene. This is a feature we added in a previous version, but now underneath this, you'll see that we have these new save current state as default, export the current state, and then load a state file. So for example, let's say that, I set up this viewport, I come over here to my environment and I set like a certain exposure. Maybe in my environment maps, I choose, some specific setup. Basically, I just set up the entire 3D scene. I can now save that here just by saving the current state as the default. So this will be my default state. Now, if you're working inside a studio or on a team or with a group of artists, this state file is also can be saved within the project. So here, if we go to Edit, Preferences, you'll see underneath our projects that here we have this state file. So this is an SBS SCN file, so it basically Substance Scene. So we can save this as a state file. So again, like I said, it's really good for if you're in a studio environment and you set up a specific scene that you want all your artists to have. This scene file can then be associated with the project that you have here as well. Now with this, you can also add in your own custom geometry. So here we'll just cancel that out. And of course we have just some very simple primitives, but if you have your own geometry that you load in here into the 3D scene, the path to that geometry is going to be stored within that state file. So again, it just helps you to just completely customize what you want to do for your 3D view. Now, I'm going to try to be monitoring these questions as I go. it's kind of hard because my microphone, I've got it on the stand and it's like right in front of my right eye, so it's like hard to kind of look over to where the chat window is. But one question that I see here, release date. So this actually came out yesterday. It is a free update for all those who are who have, well, let's say who are either on subscription or have purchased the 2017 version. As always, any of the point releases are always free updates. So you can go to your algorithmic account and download it from there. So that'll take care of like our scene view here. Another thing that I want to take a look at pretty quick, let me just link a 3D mesh into here. So let me just grab something. This is just an FBX. And we'll load this guy here. He's in the resources. Whoops, didn't mean to load that into here. So let me just reset my scene for a second. All right, so I'm going to right click and choose Bake Model Information. So, you know, we're constantly kind of changing and iterating on this baking window. It had a pretty large update recently within one of the last builds of Designer. We've now added this new export preset and load preset option here. So this is going to allow you to export bake settings into a file and then load them. So for example, let's just say that I come into here and I say, oh, I want to do like a curvature and an ambient occlusion. I just load up a bunch of bake types, position, normal, and so on. I have all these settings that I choose here. I can actually export this as a preset, and you'll notice here that it's going to save this as a JSON file. So what's really cool about this, again, this is if you're doing any type of processing using our batching tools or the automation toolkit, this will now save all of your bake settings here as a JSON file. And so what's cool about that is if you're using the bakers, the command line bakers, you can we've added the ability to load this JSON file through the command line. So now if you wanted to do a batch process, instead of having to write like several different operations within that command line, you can now just point it to this JSON file. So again, kind of a, you know, quality of life kind of thing if you're using any type of automation with Substance Designer. So one thing I will mention with this is that when you load the preset, so let's say that I save a preset and then I load it again, it's just looking for that JSON file. It is going to ignore what you had previously set as your high definition model and your output, because you're typically going to need to kind of reset these. So basically this is going to be like the core settings of the type of bakers, the type of settings it has, and so on. And then you're just going to have to set, you know, what your high def and your output is going to be. So that's our baking setup there. So like I said, that was just kind of a quick look at some just new features in the application. So now we're going to get into a lot of the actual content that we have. And so one of the things I'm going to start with here is just noises. So if we come over here to the library, we have our noises. So one of the really big features with this new release is that we now, all of the noises are going to support this non-square aspect ratio. So for example, let's say that I grab something like black and white spots. We'll bring this here into my graph. Here's my 2D view. And like I said, black and white spots. All right, so you'll notice here at the top of my viewport, parent size, I'm at 2K by 2K. So if I just check this link button, that basically unlocks it, I can now choose you know, a non-square ratio. So let's say that I set this to be 2048 by 1024. So now you'll notice that as soon as I do that, the noises here are now going to fit correctly within this ratio. So we now have full support with noises and patterns to support non-square ratios. And you'll also notice that here, if we look at our instance parameters, there's this non-square expansion button, and it's going to be enabled to true by default. So if I had this unchecked, this is what you were getting in previous versions of Substance Designer when you were wanting to work with non-square textures. So that's a thing of the past. If you do want to work with non-square, we now fully support it. So here, non-square expansion, it's always going to be set to true. And now you can see that we have this not stretched anymore, which is awesome. So with that, I will say that if you open up like an older graph, it's going to keep that result that we had before. So for example, let's say, let me just jump over into one of my old graphs. I'm just going to load this here. This is asking me, oh, there's a format change to this SBS because I had opened this in a previous version. It lets you know here. So I'm going to say, yes, I just want to convert and open this guy up. I'm sure you've ran into this several times. It's just letting you know what's happening. One of the things that I will say with this, you'll notice I have my little asterisk here, which means that this hasn't been saved. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. Now, the next time I open this up, it's going to be fine. It's not going to ask me to convert. So long story short with that, let's go into the graph itself. And so here I have this. This is a material I created in a previous version. And let's say now I want to go back and say, okay, I want to have this support a non-square. So let me set this to here. Oops, forgot to unlink it. So let's do 1024 by 512. Now you can see I'm getting this kind of stretching issue here. So if we look at a noise, let me find a noise in here somewhere. Ah, here we go. So this is like moisture noise, and you can see that it's basically letting me know this is legacy. It's kind of cut off here when I mouse over it, but it says moisture noise legacy. And this here obviously is stretched. That's because we don't have the that expansion that true false option there to support that non-square ratio. So, but again, if I go and look at moisture noise, this is the new moisture noise. We bring this guy in, you can see that it's perfectly fine because it has the new non-square true. So yeah, just a caveat there to let you know in case you were expecting, if this happens, you don't know what's going on. The older graphs are going to be set back. They're going to have this original legacy node is what's still going to be used. Okay, so one other thing that I kind of want to talk about with this non-square ratio, let's see here. Let's do this. Let's go back to this kind of original graph that I had for now. And let's see. Let me just take this back to just a square ratio for now, because this was another graph where I was using some of those legacy noises. Okay, so let's just say that we have, I want to talk to you a little bit about filters and how they are going to react if we start to work with like a non-square ratio. So here, I'll grab my shape here. And let's go into here and let's just let me just lower the scale here a bit. Okay, so this is a shape. Now what happens when this guy, if we set this to be a non-square ratio? So actually, I spoke too soon. I actually do want to keep this as a non-square. All right, so I'll double click and you can see what this guy's doing here is it still supports this non-square. So if we were to have this and turn this off, you can see how it would have stretched as previously. So here we also have this non-square tiling. So if I enable this, you can see that what it's kind of do, like certain nodes are going to behave a little bit differently when it comes to, how we support this non-square. We call it non-square expansion. So here in this particular case, you may or may not want non-square tiling. So this is just another option you can see. The nodes that are going to, be affected by how the tiling works in conjunction with this non-square ratio, you'll see that we'll have a non-square tiling option. So I was trying to get myself to the point of, what happens when you use like filters, like blurs and stuff. So for example, let's just add a blur to this guy. So here I'll add a high quality blur and we'll plug this guy into here. You'll notice, let's see, let me set my blur intensity down a little bit here. And we're going to go back up to my pixel ratio. Okay, so we have a new setting here as part of the base parameters called pixel ratio. And so what you're seeing here, if we come in and let me just increase this intensity. So because this is a non-square image, you can see that, and I'm using this blur. Let me just toy around here with just using the kind of the lower quality blur. Yeah, this one's a little bit better to see this. So let's pay attention to this blur. All right, so I have a square and I'm blurring it, but you'll see that this is, again, a problem that happened in previous versions of Designer where it's blurring, but it's blurring more on the horizontal axis or across the X. So we kind of have this stretched effect here. And so, like I said, we added this this new option here for this is for my base parameters here for this pixel aspect ratio. So for example, if I set this to square, you can see that with it set to square for the pixel aspect ratio, which this is the default setting. So here, this setting is actually on a node. I actually had this changed here as part. If I double click out here in the root of a graph or the empty area of a graph, it takes me up to that root. So this is kind of like the global pixel ratio setting for the graph. But if I look at this here on the node, you can see that it's always going to default here to square now. So again, if I set this option to absolute and I set this to stretched, this is what we were getting previously. Now, like I said, we have this new square option, which is going to also take into consideration when we're working with these non-square ratios with things like blurs, filters, stuff like that. So we're going to be able to affect that pixel ratio. So this is just a new parameter. So that kind of takes care of what I wanted to show, basically with the non-square support. Again, it's a highly requested feature, and we're really happy to bring that here into Designer. So next up, when we're talking about noises, we also, and I say we, I actually mean Nicholas did. So I will say algorithmic as a whole, with Designer, we have this scale parameter here. So here, all the noises are going to have this scale. So let's go back here into noises, and let's grab another one, like maybe, let's grab, I don't know, the cells 3. So we'll bring this guy in here as well. That one's hard to see what's going on. Let's do cells 4. So if you look at cells 4, you can see that it has a scale parameter now. And so you can see that what this does is just allow us to, well, scale or have the effect of zooming out here on this noise. And so, we set this to like something, higher the number, the more it's kind of zoom out or scale down the image here. So again, this is just kind of a nice feature to have, so we don't have to add a transform on after the noises. And so all the noises are going to have this kind of scale property. And so again, just to kind of demonstrate this with the non-square support, so say that I then set this to be, a non-square ratio, and we look, you can see this scale property here is going to, it's going to, work correctly with any of the non-square ratios that you have as well. So here you can see that I'm just changing this guy as we work here. So one other thing, let's see, what could I look at here with black and white spots? Okay, let's do this. Let me just set this here back to my square ratio. I'll just lock this guy. And you'll notice that we have this scale, and if I, zoom, pull this all the way up, it looks like it just goes to 8. This is just a default setting that we just, defaulted to. So of course you could come into here if you wanted to and change it to say something like 40, whoops. Let's say 35 here. It's not changing. Sorry about that. Not sure. I think this is just a mistake on my end, on my understanding of that. So we should be able just to change that. So you'll notice that like cells 4 actually, you can change this value up. So we'll have to check on that and see to make sure. But I was under the, I was thinking that you could actually drive this beyond a value of 8. So let me just try it with just a different noise here real quick. Sorry about this. This is probably just my mistake. So this guy goes up to 8. What if we set this to 12? Yeah, so maybe this something specific with the black and white spots why that didn't work. But you can see here with scale, it was at 8, and I just double-clicked to enter a value, and I was able to switch this to another number here. So you can go higher than that. Now, because we have this scale parameter, we did remove a noise that you may have used often. So, for example, if I come into here, there was a purlin noise that we had before. So we had purlin noise, and then we also had purlin noise zoom, and so that was one that I used a lot. So we actually removed purlin noise zoom. It's technically still here in the graph, it's just hidden. So of course, if you open any of your other older graphs that use purlin noise zoom, that noise will be there. It's not going to break anything. But we just kind of removed it because it was like a duplicate with this new scale option, so you don't really need it. So for example, if we have purlin noise, if I drag this here into my graph, you can see I have this scale property. So it's basically the same thing. It's just now built into all in one node instead of having to have 2 nodes. And with that said, yeah, I see the comment. One person had mentioned it's 8 stops for them as well, and yeah, it could be that some of the parameters may be clamped. And I'm sorry, that's just my fault or my misunderstanding of the feature. And I'll ask Nicholas to make sure that I get that cleared up to see what happened there. But yeah, like I was saying, we just removed it so it's not like a duplicate of that node. So with that said, talking about purlin noise, the purlin noise node is new, and it's been improved, and it's much more accurate now. It's very much more closer to an actual purlin noise now. So the algorithm has been changed, and now it's more like a purlin noise. The original Perlin noise that we had is still here in the graph, and we're just calling that Gaussian noise. So you'll see it's right here. So this is the original. Of course, it has the scale parameter to it. So if you're wondering, you know, oh, I'm using Perlin, but it looks a little different, it definitely is different. Like I said, this is more accurate, and it's going to work more like an actual Perlin noise would. And that original algorithm is still here, but we just renamed it to Gaussian noise. So it's there as well. Okay, so here, just kind of checking through some of my notes here. Let's see. Yeah, we updated that. Let's see. Yeah, these are another one of these guys that I kind of want to talk about. Like I said, we updated Perlin noise, more closer to a true Perlin. Wood noise is gone. So there was a, you know, you do a search for wood, you would see like there was a wood noise. That's been removed, and that is because we were able to basically consolidate that to, you know, its own noise. So now you can find that same noise underneath directional noise. So if I just do a search for directional noise here, you'll see that now we have these directional noises. So this is essentially like the wood pattern that you had before. Again, that's one that I used quite often. Of course, like I said before, if you use that in a previous graph, it's still going to be there when you open your previous graph. It's not going to break anything. But like if I bring in directional noise and we take a look, this is going to give you the same pattern. It's just that we now have a couple extra settings here. We've got our scale, of course, you know, disorder, angle random, things like this. So we can, you know, make just a few changes, but this is going to replace that original wood noise that we had. Okay, so let me also take a look at cell. Let's see here. Do cell 4. Oops. Search for this guy. Okay, so we have cells 4. This was a noise that we had looked at previously, and this guy has been updated just a bit as well. So like I said, we have our scale option here, but we have a new option here for this color source, and it's set to random, which is, you know, producing the effect that we see here. We could change this to pseudo-random, and you can adjust this with a manual seed. So what you'll notice here is that it's not actually changing the pattern, but it's just changing that the luminance range within here. And then we have the ability to do an image input. So this is pretty cool. So now we have a new input. So just to demonstrate this, let me create a shape node. And let me try setting this to this paraboloid. And we'll input this here into our cells, and then double click. And so now here's the kind of shape that or the effect that I'm getting from cells. So let me go back to the shape. I'll just reduce the size. And here we go. We've got our scale that we can adjust. So it's just pretty interesting. You know, we can change our disorder and so on. So the color source input is now coming from, you know, whatever type of input we have. So in this case, I use something really simple like this paraboloid shape, but just extra functionality here that's part of the cells 4 node. Okay, so another thing that we're going to start looking at here, we're talking about generators. We've done some pretty cool improvements to the tile generator and the tile sampler node. So I want to take a look at that. So here, I'm going to do a search for tile generator. This guy's a trusty old node. It gets used a lot here in Designer, and we've shown some love here to this node. So first thing you'll notice that the parameters here have been reorganized, and you may either be really happy about that, or that could be a little bit of a frustration because, you know, it's always, you know, you get one release, you get another release, parameters get reorged around, and you're like, where was the parameter I had before? So we just reorganized it so that it was a lot easier to see, you know, it made more sense as you work through these parameters. So, you know, nothing's removed, it's just things have just been reorganized. So you might need to refamiliarize yourself with some of these settings here. Okay, so like I said before, if we were to quickly switch this to non-square, so we'll look at this guy. Whoops, I had it locked. Let's do just set this guy here. Again, tile generators respect the non-square ratios. Again, we have the non-square expansion set to true as it is by default. Okay, so now let's take a look at the tile generator and some of the kind of new stuff with this. So like I said, we have the reorg. One of the things that I think is the coolest part about this is in the pattern. So here you always have the patterns that you can work with, and you've always been able to do an image input, but we now have the option to add multiple inputs here to the tile generators, which is awesome. So to demonstrate that, let's come in here and do a shape node, and we'll make this one a square. So let's plug this guy here into the first pattern input, and we'll look at the tile generator, and okay, obviously, okay, we've got that input. So now I'm just gonna, copy and paste this, and let's set this one here to something else, like maybe, I don't know, pyramid. So now we have like a pyramid shape, and copy and paste, and let's set this one here to waves. So 3 different patterns here. So what I can do is go back to this tile generator, and I can set my pattern input number. So let's switch it here to 3. And now I've got these new inputs. So we'll put, we'll just fill these guys in with these new shapes. And so here you can see in the 2D view, we are now able to create a tile. Of course, we can, work with our X and Y amount. We can, go in with our size, adjust our over our scale, randomize, all of the same kind of functionality that we had before. Our offsets, let's see, our random offset, and so on. So we can, go through and, like I said, just tweak all these different types of values like this. Here, let me just reset this to get it back to where it's more of kind of in this square pattern. But like I said, we have these 3 different inputs. Now, if we come back over here to our pattern input number, again, we can add more than 3. But we also have this drop-down list here, and you can see that right now it's set to random. And so if we look, I have 3 shapes here. So we have a square, this pyramid, and then this guy, and they're the waves, and they're going into 1, 2, and 3. And so randomly, you can see if we look at our tiles, right now I have a 6x6 tile, so 6x6. And you can see that it's taking each one of these shapes and just randomly placing it in one of these tiles. So that's what the random does. Then we also have this by pattern number option. So if I select by pattern number, you can now see what it's going to do here is we've got, this first kind of row is going to be all pattern 1. The second is going to be pattern 2, and the third is going to be pattern 3, and then it repeats. So just, another way of working with this. So with tile generator, you have random, and then you have by pattern number. And so that's how the tile generator works. This is super, super handy to have. So it's really great addition here to the tile generator. And so we also have this done with the tile sampler. So let's look at this node. So we'll do tile sampler. Bring this guy in. Let's get rid of the generator, and let's go back to the sampler. So here, underneath pattern, we have square. Let's set it to pattern input, and of course we can set our pattern number just as we did before. So let me just fill in these guys here. So we'll do this. So pattern 1 is square, 2 is the pyramid, and 3 is the waves. Just so we can really kind of more clearly see this, let me set it to a 6x6. So this is pretty much what we already had with the tile generator. You can see that underneath input distribution, we have the same options. We have random, we have pattern number. So, this one here is following the pattern number. And then we have this new option, which is distribution map. Now, this is only for the tile sampler, and it's pretty awesome. So let's set this here to distribution map. And then we here on the tile sampler, you'll notice that we have this pattern distribution map input. So let's make a map input. Just to demonstrate this, I'll do a shape. And let's see here. Let me set this to cone. And maybe just adjust my size down a little bit. Okay. So we're going to take the output of our shape, and we're going to plug this here into our pattern distribution input. So now when we look at the result here of the tile sampler, here's kind of what we're getting. So let me go back over here to this shape, and let me just adjust my scale. So I'm going to take the scale actually all the way up to 1. And so now what you'll see here is that our patterns are being distributed based on whatever this shape is. Now, it does it based on the actual luminance range of this shape. So if we look, you can see this is a cone, and here at the very, very center, it's like a bright, full white value, and then we've got this very, very soft gradient, as this kind of rolls off all the way here to black. And so if we look at what's happening here with our shape, any area in the shape or the distribution map that's white, so the pure white area, that's going to take the very last input. So it's going to be pattern 3. So you'll notice here within our shape, we start to get pattern 3 around this kind of more white area. Now, as it starts to fall off towards black, so everywhere that's black, you're going to see that's where we get pattern 1. So again, if we look at this, we can see that pattern 1 is kind of being distributed along where kind of more of the black area is. And of course, since we have a nice kind of transitional gradient into that, we start to get a bleed from the pattern 3, which is in the white. Then here, as we start to get gray more towards black, we start to see some of our second pattern. And then again, as we get closer to the black value in that distribution map, we get the first pattern. And so again, that's how the this pattern input works here. And so, yeah, we can do a lot of things to help distribute these types of patterns based on this input map that we choose. And so that's how that works with the tile sampler. Like I said, one of my favorite features here is this pattern input number, and that we can, randomly generate or position different shapes based in this tile generator or sampler. Here's one question. You can also use a custom mask. Yes, you can do that as well. So for example, let's say, I don't know, let's do Perlin noise. And here, all in one node, so I can use this guy. And let's do a levels. Just try to make like a little kind of some type of a mask here. And with the tile sampler, you have things like a mask input or a color input. So here I'll try the mask input. We'll bring this in. We'll scroll down here towards the bottom, and you'll have your mask map threshold. And as I start to increase this threshold, it's going to use the value range from whatever I put into this mask input. And so here you can have a mask controlling, a certain input mask, a distribution mask, and then, we can have these shapes here as well. So, are these, varied shapes all coming into this tile sampler. So pretty cool feature there. Okay, so again, let me just check through my notes. Just want to make sure I do not forget anything. Okay, so let's kind of switch gears a little bit and take a look at some patterns. So here in our generators, we've got noises and patterns, and we have a new arc pavement pattern. This is awesome because, sometimes you need to make like different kind of arc pavement patterns like this, and instead of having to, manually do this, we just added a generator. And you can see that, of course, we've got the scale option here, which we've got our pattern amount, so a lot of controls on this guy. You can just kind of run through this and get an idea of what a lot of these patterns do here. So a lot of different randomization options and things like that. So here, we have these here. We can also go into our pattern input, and of course you can change these, to different ones, or you can use an input image if you like. I just happen to have a really nice graph that Nicholas Weirman created, as he was kind of testing this feature. And so I just want to share that with you now. It's really nice effect that Nicholas did. So I'm just going to load this graph up, and here it is. And I'm pretty sure we're going to share this on Substance Share. So just be on a lookout for that. I don't think it's on there yet, but yeah, this is definitely something that we want to share. Okay, so if we take a look, you can see that this here is using the arc pavement generator, and you can see here where Nicholas, just took he made his own shape, so he's just getting kind of a shape like this, and then he's using that with the pattern set to input image, and so here he's getting this type of pattern. And this is the end result that he was able to create using, the new arc pavement generator here, or excuse me, pattern. Okay, so that is arc pavement. Let's see. Another feature that we have that's pretty cool. We have a new node here called the Cube 3D. This guy's pretty interesting. So it's gives you a cube here. And so here you have this cube shape. Now, you'll notice here that this has this little widget control here. This is a position offset widget. This is a new widget. Here you can see this is orientation offset. And this is something that you can use as well to this is something you can use as well in your own custom nodes that you create. So again, it's just a new widget that we added in previous version. We added the transform widget, and we were exposed the ability to work with that transform widget here in the 2D view, and this new orientation offset is part of that as well. So now I've got this nice little widget that lets me rotate this 3D shape. So here we can adjust things like our scale. We can adjust, all kinds of different, the parameters for the XYZ size here, and so on. And then again, we can interactively adjust the offset here to this. So this again can be used to help kind of build up different types of, geometry shapes and so on. You can imagine if we go in and were to, take this shape and try to replicate it. So for example, maybe I try something like, I don't know, just real quick. Whoops. Let me just grab, let's say, I'll just do splatter circular. We're going to talk about this guy here in a bit as well. So I'll plug this into splatter circular, and let's come over here to where I have my pattern. I'm going to set this to image input. So here I'm getting my squares, and we'll do things like, adjust our pattern amount. Whoops, here. Let's see, we'll just keep that there. Radius, and let me just take my spread all the way up. All right, just playing around with this here just for a second. Whoops. Here again, just one thing I'll notice, you'll see a lot of the generators be on the lookout for the pattern, because they're going to have, if it has an image input, it's going to allow you to work with a pattern input number. So again, we can add more patterns to this here as well. So let me just come over here to my size, plug this guy up. And make sure, I think this guy is defaulting here. Yeah, blending mode is set to max. So you can see, it's just kind of cool. You can start to kind of build on some of these, use this cube to kind of help build on some of these geometric shapes they're trying to work with. So again, what I'm going to do, double click to view the splatter circular here in the 2D view, single click the cube, and you can see that I still get that transform widget. So now I can do some really neat stuff by just, changing some values here, just rotating that cube around, maybe adjust the scale, again, kind of work with some of its parameters here to get just different, geometric shapes and so on. So, again, this cube just kind of gives you some really cool, interesting effects and so on, as you can see here. It's mesmerizing. It's fun to play with. So I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot of fun here with this stuff. But anyways, that's the Cube 3D. Okay, let's delete that guy out of there. Okay, so again, talking about patterns and shapes, another one, and actually I should have demonstrated it this way, but we have a new tool here called the Shapemapper. This guy is a lot of fun as well. So for example, let's go back and just for fun, let's just grab the Cube 3D again. And this guy takes an input. So we're going to feed in the cube. And here, if I double click, you can see that we're now looking at the Shapemapper. And so this guy here needs to, this guy here is just, again, just helps you create like just all kinds of different geometric shapes pretty quickly. So we have two options, circle and polygon. So if I set this here to circle, you can see that we can start to change, the pattern amount. We've got radius, width, rotation. This is the overall rotation. There's this flip 1 on 2. So if we switch this, you can see that, it's changing the orientation. So here, if I set this maybe over to, say, polygon, I'm getting this type of shape. Let me switch my segments. Maybe something like 3. Kind of rotate this guy and then, make some more patterns with this. Adjust my radius. Let's see. You got your width. It's just fun. You can just play around with this guy a lot and get some different types of effects. Here's flip 1 and 2. Turn this on and off. You can see, kind of stuff you're getting here. So yeah, it's really an interesting node. Again, a really good way to be able to create different types of just random geometric shapes. So we'll set this guy back to circle, and it produced this. Pretty interesting. Another thing here, let's see. If we go back into Shapemapper, and this time let me do a shape, like a square, just something like this. Yeah, a lot of uses for this node here. Let's see. like I said, it's a lot of fun to play with this guy. So here we're getting like this kind of shape. Here, let's see on the Shapemapper, if we look, flip 1 on 2, get these kind of stuff going on. There we go. So that's pretty cool, interesting here. You can see rotations just rotating the entire thing. Yeah, so like I said, Shapemapper, we're just using this guy, just create a cool kind of geometric pattern shape here. A lot of uses for this, a lot of fun just to go in and experiment and play around with it. Okay, so let me just check my list over here again. I'll tell you what, before I get into the scratch generator, I'm going to go back more to looking at this splatter circular. So, you know, we kind of talked about this guy a little bit already, where, you know, I just kind of demonstrated where, you know, we just kind of placed a shape into here. So if we bring this guy in here, and we'll set this to, let's see, that image input. And so you can see that this is taking, you know, what I had here as this shape, and then, you know, it's just going to do the splatter circular. So we've had a splatter circular in Substance Designer before. This one has been, you know, completely reworked. And as you can see here, there are tons of parameters here with this guy. So let me do this. Let me grab a shape here. And this guy into here. So yeah, some of these guys you can see, well, we have our pattern amount. We can randomize this. You know, we have a min, max, a ring amount. So what's really cool about this guy here is that we couldn't do with the previous splatter circles. We can now start to create rings in here. So let me just drop down really quick here to my size or my scale. Scale this guy down a bit. And we'll come up here to where we had those rings. Where are they here? Ring amount. So now we can create rings within this splatter circular. Also, you can create spirals. So we can, you know, turn this in here to a spiral shape. Again, let me just adjust some of my size into here and so on. So spiral shapes. Also, there's a control in here. Like I said, we can randomize everything. Our pattern input. So again, if we come back up here to our input, we could start to increase different numbers here. So for example, let's say that we have this guy, which is just a square, and let me just copy and paste this one. And this time I'm going to come over to, let's try, I'll just keep this at waves just because it's, you know, pretty visible. So again, we go back to splatter circular and we set this guy up here to image input. Let's just set this to like a second pattern, and we'll plug this guy in. So now you can see that I get 2 patterns within this. And then as we kind of scroll down through here, you'll notice that there are options like for your size and position that we can affect these based on that ring amount or pattern number. So for example, if we want to do scale by pattern number, you can see that I can adjust that. Also scale by ring number. So we can adjust this as well. So you can see that we're getting this effect of each ring is going to have a different scale value and so on. Luminance by pattern number, or we can do luminance by ring number here as well. So you can see, again, it starts to kind of fade out as we go. Again, it's so much fun just to kind of play around with this. You can create so many cool like effects and stuff. And so while I'm there, I also want to give another special thanks to Nicholas Weirman. He created some really awesome presets for me to show off. So I just want to show you guys these splatter circular examples. So here you'll notice this is, here's one example Nicholas did here with the splatter circular node. This one has a really cool feature that it kind of shows off. If I scroll down, let me see if I can find it where the rotation is. So here, let's close up some of these guys because there's a lot of parameters here. It could get overwhelming. But there is this option here where it says ring rotation offset, and it's set to 0.5. So if you zoom in, if I set this over here to, we'll say 0, you know, we're getting this shape. Now, as I set this, look at this, is awesome. You're getting kind of like this swirl here, so that's cool. And then if we set this to 0.5, here you can see where it's placing the pattern here at this kind of a 0.5 offset. And then if I start to just, go beyond that again, it just changes. But you can see at 0.5, it's going to put the rotation at that 0.5 offset to each one of these pattern shapes. So it can produce kind of effects like this, kind of these like honeycomb grids like this, which is cool. Here's another one. Again, just this one here for the pattern, it's just using a gradation, but it's just, just going in and playing around with these parameters to come up with these types of effects. This one here, this one is just kind of showing off, let's see, underneath position, is it? Yeah, the spread angle. So here you can do, this is the spread of the ring. So this one's using a ring amount set to 10, and then again, we can adjust that here to create a Pac-Man if you need. So we've got a Pac-Man generator, really long overdue, I would say. Okay, so then you can do other cool stuff like this. Like Nicholas showed me this and it just blew my mind. I was like, what? I mean, this is so cool. So yeah, this is, again, you can see it's just a splatter circular, no crazy complex node structure. It was just going in and playing with these settings here to come up with something like this, which is pretty awesome. Here again, this one's just showing another just rotation setting. Here's another kind of example. Again, just playing around. Splatter circular, another kind of cool pattern. This one again is using kind of that same pattern that I kind of shown before, and then just using a transform right after that so we could move it along or transform it. So this one you can get this type of effect. Again, this just totally blew me away that you can produce these kind of effects now with this new splatter circular. Pretty awesome. Here is an example of a spiral. Looks pretty cool. Again, nothing special to it. It's not even using any specific input. It's just, playing around with the settings here. Here's another example. This one here I thought was pretty awesome as well. So yeah, a lot of cool just geometric pattern shapes. What was this one? Oh yeah, this one's good. This one here is kind of using let's see, what was it here? You got the ring rotation random. So here it is without the random, and then if we kind of randomize that, we get that kind of effect here. And then also you've got this luminance by pattern number. So here, if we set this to 0, this is what we get. But then again, we can vary that luminance by the pattern number to get something more like this. So pretty interesting. Again, this is something I definitely think we should make this Substance, this SBS file here, accessible to everyone. So I'm just going to ask the team if we can just, we'll just put this on Substance Share so that you can download the SBS file and just take a look at, these examples and stuff and see how, shapes like this, or especially like this one here, how in the world was this done? So pretty cool. Also, one of the things I want to mention in case you didn't know, so this is another thing you can do about Designer. This isn't new to Designer 2017.2, but it is a pretty awesome feature. You've got these instance parameters, and say Nicholas tweaked all these controls are pretty awesome. You can at any time come over to this little page icon. Oops, I'm sorry, this one, and you can save a preset file to this. So I could call this this is crazy awesome preset, and just save it, on, my desktop or whatever, and it saves it as a Substance preset file. So save, and you can share that with, your friends, colleagues, or whoever, and then I can just simply load that. So for example, if I have my splatter circular, and I don't know what to do to create a cool pattern like that, so what I could now do is just come in and load the preset file. Oh, I definitely want to use crazy awesome. Boom, and then I've got my preset. So anyways, in case you didn't know, that's always been there, but pretty handy way to share preset files without having to save the SBS. Okay, so that was the circular. Looking at my time, it's been 47 minutes. I'd like to try to keep it at an hour. Don't want to spend too much time talking into you guys' ear. Hopefully it's not too annoying. Let's see here. Let me look at the Scratch generator because it's pretty awesome. I keep saying that, but the guys did create some pretty cool stuff. Let's see here. Where do I have this guy already? I think I have something pre-made that can go pretty quick. Here, let's do this. So this car paint. Okay. All right, so this here is just, this car paint, this is just an MDL. If you're interested, we actually have a lesson on how to create a car paint shader using the MDL material node that's on Substance Academy if you're interested in that. So here, it might be a little hard to see in this stream because, you know, I don't want to spend time letting iRay kind of refine this. But we have a new scratch generator. So let me just come over into the library and do a search for Scratch, is it? Okay, so you'll see that we have Scratch's generator, and then you have Scratcher's generator normal. So there's two variations of this guy, and both are creating, well, scratches. And so here you can see an iRay, and I'm using iRay specifically because to get the type of effect that I want to get, that I'm showcasing here, you have to use like a path tracer. So it's kind of difficult to get that with a real-time shader based on, you know, the MIP mapping issues that it causes. But you'll notice here that we have this really bright highlight. And here on this clear coat layer, this weighted layer here, I'm using this flake, I'm sorry, not flakes. Where is it? Right here, the scratches generator. So if I look here at just the mask, let me do this. This is the new scratches that's being produced. So this is kind of the effect of this new scratch generator. Scratch generator. So as you'll see, it's super organic. It's really good. If we look here at kind of like what we used to get previously, you get something like kind of like this. It's real kind of hard to tell in this, but it's anyways, it's not nearly as cool as the new one. We'll just say that. So you can see you get really randomized results. So basically, like Nicholas was telling me, in this version, instead of taking like just like a simple, like maybe it's a shape or maybe it's 2 or 3 different shapes and just randomly generating variations on that shape, this one you can see it actually is using or drawing out these splines, and each one of these splines is completely unique. So it's not just taking like, you know, 3 or 4 different, you know, hard-coded shapes, I'll say, and replicating them. It's all these unique scratch lines, and it's super organic, and you have tons of control over this. So what you get when you use this with something like a path tracer, and I'm sorry, I need to let this really render a bit more, so just while I'm talking, let me do this. Let me set my sample ratio up here to like maybe 1,000. And so now iRay's kicking along. It's probably not going to be enough. We do 8,000. There we go. So again, iRay's kind of kicking along. So yeah, you can see here we got this really bright highlight, and what's happening is this highlight, you see these scratches, and we're getting this really cool, like kind of swirling type effect from these scratches, and this is really kind of mimicking how scratches work in the real world. And the reason is really comes down to the benefit of using this scratches generator normal option. So right now we're viewing the mask option. Here, let me stop iRay too for now because it's going to bog everything down. Oh, good. Someone says we can see the scratch. I refreshed. Okay, sorry, guys. Let me just hit pause. So, move this guy over. Okay, so this is just like the mask output. I'm just showing this to you so that we can just see, you know, more clearly what's being created here. So here is the actual normal map. And what this is doing, if I zoom in really close, we can see that this is actually computing the normals in a very accurate way. So if you had this mask, you would get a totally different result if I just were to take this mask and then, you know, create a normal node and just pipe this, what we'll call it a height map sort of, into this mask, excuse me, into a normal generator. We wouldn't get the same result that we're getting here. So the Scratch normal generator is actually computing these normals based on the directional information that we're getting here from these scratches. So here you can see all of the different vector information that we're getting in each one of these scratches, and how each one of them here is totally random, and again, it follows along with that direction. And because of that, if we take a look here at these scratches, we're getting this highlight. So you get this highlight, and you can see that the light direction is catching these scratches, and the normal map is actually providing you know, the correct vector information that it needs to create more real-world type results like you would see with an actual highlight and these scratches here on the surface. So that's why we're getting kind of this swirling kind of spiral pattern like this. And so again, that's very specific to using the scratch generator here with this normal output. And just to kind of give you an idea here, if we go back into like our normal, like I said here, we've got this spline number, so we can, you know, do things like adjust the spline. We can adjust kind of the max segment per spline. So for example, just real quick, just kind of demonstrate this. If I go back here to my normal and I'll zoom in, and let me try to, let's see. Yeah, let's look at this one. So here you can see, like, here's one scratch here, and if I zoom in really close, the segment set to 4, and so now we can see these segments. And so for each segment, you can see that this different vector information that's being computed, which is going to provide a much more realistic lighting that we're going to get based on this normal map. So here again, if I start to increase, you know, these lines per segment, we can see that that information is getting updated. Here back at the mask output, all kinds of different things. So we've got spline rotation. So if we want to, you know, create more like horizontal type scratches, we can do something like this. Maybe decrease my distortion random, things like that. So there's just a ton of options here to play around with. Normal intensity, again, that's talking about for the normal output. And we can do a normal intensity random. That's really cool too. Let's look at that. So here you can see that my normal intensity is set to 1, but there's also a random value to this. So at 0, you get this normal intensity, but we can also, which is still varied, like I said, so you can see some different variants here, but then we can, you know, randomize that even more if we need to. So it's really, really realistic results. What else? Oh, okay, yeah. So this one here, you get this fade mode, so it's, well, it defaults at start, but you can switch the fade mode to be at the end of the scratch. You can adjust like your fade length and so on. So just a lot of control over this. Now, this other scratch generator is just, it's the same control, same setup, but it just doesn't have the normal output. And you may use that, maybe you don't need that. Okay, so that was the scratch generator. Checking my time, starting to run out. Okay, let's, I'm going to look at just a few more things before I get into one of my favorite features. Let's go back over here to this little graph that I had. And just output this guy into here just so we have something to look at. Wait, renderer, OpenGL. Okay. That's what that was. All right, Swirl. Okay, so we have a new node called Swirl. Of course, we have a color variation and a grayscale. Let's just look at grayscale. Grayscale. This one's really straightforward, but I'll show it to you because it's nice. So we'll do like a checker here, and I'll feed this guy into Swirl, and then you can just create, well, swirl patterns. Here we go. You can see that you get a swirl amount. Now we've got of course you have the transform widget, so we can just use this to move this around. I don't know why, but like this is one of the first things I did, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. Of course, we can rotate and scale this guy and so on as we work. So it's pretty neat. So that's Swirl. Then we also have a, let's see, vector morph. So let's do vector morph, color or grayscale. Let me look at the grayscale version here. So we'll drop this guy down, and I'll use the checker again just so we can kind of demonstrate it. So now I need a vector field. Let's do maybe a Perlin noise. Drop the scale down, and let me create a normal. So this is going to create the vector, and we'll set this to like, I don't know, 25, just something really high so we can see it. Now I have a vector field, so I can just, you know, plug this guy into here, and if we look at the result, it's pretty intense. So we'll just drop this amount down. So this is just morphing here. So you can see that here, this kind of morphing effect that I'm getting. Now, we also had another node in here. What is that thing called? Oh, vector warp. So we have morph, and now we have vector warp. And so, you know, the differences between these guys, if you take a look here. So let's just feed in the same maps here. And we'll take our intensity down. So here's morph, and then here's warp. So, you know, when you first look at it, you're like, oh, that's pretty similar. Vector morph is just does this in a way without creating artifacts. So basically, if we look at the warp, as we start to warp this, you'll see that it starts to basically loop over top of itself, like right here. So here we're warping. See how this area here is being warped? And then it just starts to just break apart, and it's just warping and just looping over top of itself. Well, vector morph will never do that. So here you can see that it's just morphing, just blending. It's still, look, it's just pushing these guys to the total limit of what I have here in this vector field. And so again, it's just not going to loop over itself, as you see here, which is great. So that's vector morph. And of course, like I said, we have grayscale and color versions of that. Okay, so another thing we have that's pretty, that's actually really useful, and you can see I'm using it here. So this here is this here is a material that I'm working on for a tutorial that I'm going to be doing. So one of the things I'm trying to do is work on this new, what I'm calling a material series for Substance Academy, which is going to be like node by node, let's create a complex material. And I'm working on one for wood pattern, this wood pattern. I've been working on it for a long time. And I'll tell you one thing is that I've got this thing done, and it's almost done. And then this release comes out, and I look at it, and I go back and say, man, I could have done things so much differently. And now I have this, like, I don't know, push and pull against myself. Should I go redo the whole thing? Or, you know, so I definitely don't, because it's coming out soon. But anyways, long story short with that, this is part of a material that I'm kind of working on. And I wanted to be able to kind of, you know, this is like our height map, basically. And I'm going to show you how this was done here in a second. But we have a new node that's super useful, and it's called Histogram Select, I think. Is that right? Yeah, Histogram Select. So, of course, we've got several histogram nodes. Select is new. And what this does, or one of the things, it just allows you to select specific ranges of a histogram. And it's really cool for, like, using it with a height map. So, for example, I could say, well, this is a height map I have. Let's plug this into the Histogram Select. And so now you can see that I've got, like, this range here and a position. So what this does, like, let's just say that I want to select here in my height map, I want to select this kind of top range to this. Well, I can use this tool to help me do that. So here I might set my range and then adjust here my position. So I'll set my range at 0.5, and of course I have a contrast control. So now I can just select here in my height map kind of the topmost, or the, you know, the highest areas in that height map. And so I did that here. What was I using it for? Okay, yeah, so here I wanted to add like some crack damage that you can see here kind of towards this top. And so in this particular case, what I did was I said, well, I'm going to use, well, I did SID levels in that case, but I could have used, this is before I was using this node. I could use histogram, so before I had a levels, now I can use Histogram Select to select certain ranges of that. To, you know, again, like I said, pull out different areas of what your height's going to be. So now we have this wrapped in a specific node, Histogram Select. Okay, so let's see. Let me just check my list here. 3 o'clock. I'm sorry, everybody. I've got to go just a little bit more because now I want to show by far my favorite feature of the whole thing. This is so cool. This is awesome. Okay, so we now have this new node that's called the Floodfill. Okay, and this guy is incredible. So there's so many times that you've wanted to use something like this. I know when you see this, you're gonna be like, I needed this. All right, so for example, I you know, started with a pattern, and basically I created like a rock shape like this. Okay, now in my case, I don't have a way to like randomize this pattern anymore. You know, like, you know how like you have your tile generator and there's that color randomization, and you can, you know, randomize your bricks. So basically, if I come like to tile generator, and if I come down here to color luminance random, you know, how can I create this type of effect from a single image like this? So now we have a new way to do that, and it's called the Floodfill. Okay, so this node is actually comprised of a single node, and here's what it looks like. And this creates what looks like here to be UV data, and you'll see that it works pretty much like that. And so this data here is used with a subset of nodes to create different types of effects. So for example, here I've got my flood fill. Here, let's just do it from scratch up here. So let's do a flood fill here. And I'm going to feed in this guy here. So now I get this result. This is the data that I can use. And then if I do a search for flood, you can see that we have the flood fill to B-box, to gradient, to position, to random color, and to random grayscale. So in my case, what I want to do is I want to do a random gradient. So now I plug this in, and bam, I've got this randomized gradient. And I can come into my angle variation and change this. I can change things like the actual angle and the angle variation. So now I went from just having, you know, this shape, this binary shape, and now I've got this gradient here. Very useful. I mean, this is super useful. So one of the ways, and I'm going to show you a couple workflows here. So one of the ways that's pretty cool to using this guy is how we can build up 3D shapes. And that's how I created the height map for this guy. So that's how I was able to do this. So let's just do this really quick. So let me just bring these guys over here out of the way, and let's just rebuild this real fast. Okay, so here we have this guy. Now what I'm going to do is set my angle variation here to 1, and then I'm going to come over here to, let's see, my base attributes here for this base parameters, and I can adjust this random seed. So I'm going to just copy and paste this node. So now I have 2 of these guys. Again, the angle variation is set to 1. So now if I come over here to the random seed and set it to 1, I'm going to get a variation. So here's the first one, and here's the second one, 2 different variations. So now I can use a blend, and we'll blend these 2 guys together like this. And then in the blending mode, I'm going to set it to min. And now I'm starting to get some cool kind of slopes here. So it's almost like, I took this gradient and I'm starting to kind of just carve out slope sections. So let's do it again. We'll copy and paste this guy into here. And here, this one, we'll just change the random seed yet again. I'll add another blend. And set this blending mode back to min as well. Where is it? Boom. So now I'm getting like another variation of that. Copy and paste. Let's do it again. Oops. What'd I do there? Let's switch this guy to 3. Blend. Just hook this up real quick. Blending mode set to min. And now I get another shape. Okay, so now you can see that, again, starting from this shape, we ran it through the Floodfill, randomized these gradients, combined them together, and now we're starting to get more of like a 3D shape like this. Okay, so this is kind of the start of it. Now, if we look back at this gradient and we want to look at some of these settings, some of the important thing to understand is this multiply by bounding box size. So if we look at this shape, you can see that, well, we have a bunch of different patterns here. So, we have like, let's say this shape here, we have this shape, here's this one here that's a little bit smaller. So basically we have some shapes that are small and some shapes in this case that are pretty large. And so these patterns or shapes can have like this bounding box. Now, right now at a value of 0, you'll notice that I'm basically using the same gradient for all these shapes. So for example, I have this really large shape here, and it goes from kind of this dark all the way up to this really bright white here. Well, this is a large shape. If I were to look at a corresponding shape right next to it, so we'll look at this guy that's smaller, he goes from a dark value all the way up to the same bright white. So there's no variation in terms of the tonal range for these shapes. Now, the problem with that is if we were to want to use this with a height map, it doesn't really help us in our variation because basically, since we're using the same gradient, we're getting the same values for large shapes versus small shapes. So that's why we have this ability to multiply this based on the bounding box size for these shapes. So to give you an idea of how that works, if I start to increase this value, you can see that it's redistributing this gradient value. If I set this all the way to 1, you'll now see, and hopefully it's apparent in the video, you'll now see that we get a more corrected result. So for example, let's look at this large shape that I have here that I'm kind of outlining with my mouse. You've got this dark, and then it goes to maybe this light value. Okay? So see how light it is at this tonal range. Then right next to it, we have a smaller shape. So we've multiplied this gradient by its bounding box. So its bounding box is smaller. And what happens is this area is dark. It's darker than here. We've got a different kind of tonal gradient fall off. And you'll notice that here on this end, this value or this more brighter value is much dimmer than, say, it is here on this bigger, larger shape. So now we get, a different result to that. And that's this multiply by bounding box. That's what that's doing for us. Okay, so that's kind of like the technical explanation of what that's doing. But if we look at it from a practical standpoint, this is what it does for us. So if we go back, notice now what it did. It pushed this shape over. Now we've got this really nice plane here. So I like to think of this like I'm in ZBrush and I'm trying to model this shape. And I use like the trim dynamic brush and I'm just doing like a little trim dynamic right here. Boom, 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 boom. And I get this plane. And if I go back to this bounding box size, you can see that, we can change or adjust this. I can also come in here to my angle and adjust it this way too, just to get different shapes. Now maybe I'll go back to this guy and make an adjustment to his bounding box. So we'll do this. And then maybe rotate it to get some kind of shape. Go back to this one, adjust his bounding box. multiply by bounding box, and then so on. So I'm just, you know, trying to go in and just create the type of shape I want. So this, like right here, here's a really cool point. Like say here, I got my trim dynamic brush and I want to just trim that back. So I'm going to multiply it by the bounding box size. And now look, I'm just creating a plane right here. Just trim it back, boom, just like you would like say in ZBrush or something. So it's like a little sculpting that we're doing here. And so that gives me this type of effect. And then from here, I might just do something like a levels just to kind of, you know, reprocess everything. So do something like this. Whoops, there we go. And now I've got like a really cool height map that I was able to create based on just this plain binary shape. Now, one of the things I want to mention with this, a couple caveats. So when you use the Floodfill, you have to have a border like this. Okay, so for example, if I were to take like a shape, let's take this guy, and hopefully, you know, I've showed this in the tutorial, so if you don't remember what we're doing here, don't worry, it's in the tutorial file. So we have this shape. If I hit the space bar, it shows the tiling. Notice that with tiling, this is just a real continuous shape. There's no break here. So if I then try to Floodfill this guy, you can see this is what it just breaks. So we get this like crazy checker pattern. Now again, to fix it, I would need to create a border, right? So let's come back over and select this guy, and I'm just going to decrease my X to create a border. And as soon as I create a little black border, you can see it here. It fixes that Floodfill shape for me. So again, you just have to have like a border around the shape. And that's, again, what we're talking about with that bounding box size for each one of these shape pieces. Another thing to think about with it is we can't have a hole. So for example, let's do this. Let's do a disk. And just quickly copy and paste this guy and do a blend. Boom. Subtract this guy. Let's grab him. All right, so now I've got a shape like this where I have like a hole in the middle of this shape. And if we try to flood this guy, yeah, it's going to break. So see here, we get this kind of messed up pattern here. So just those two caveats, you know, you got to have a border and you can't use shapes with holes. Oh, and one other thing that I do want to mention that I think is pretty important here is that, oh, my mouse is freaking out on me. Hold on a second. No, there we go. So this Floodfill requires the use of the GPU engine, the Substance GPU engine for now. So, for example, if you wanted to use this in an integration that doesn't allow GPU, like for example, Unity only allows CPU engine, the Floodfill wouldn't work. So you just need to be aware of that. It does require the GPU engine to work. Okay, so that's kind of part of the Floodfill. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm just going to keep going a little bit more. Really appreciate your patience on it. Just a lot to show. So I do want to talk a little bit more about the Floodfill here. Let's see. Where are we here? Yeah, let me just kind of show something with these rocks. What was something I did here? Oh, okay, I'll tell you what. Let me do this. This will be better. Let me open up another version here. So this is these wood planks that I had been working on for the tutorial. Like I said, like now I'm thinking about, am I gonna have to go back and redo some stuff because of these new nodes and how helpful they are. So for example, I just want to show you one thing here. So one of the things I was doing here that you'll probably do often. Let me grab my wood pattern and my planks node. Okay, so this here is a planks. And just here, let me just kind of set this up for us real quick. Because like I said, I didn't... all right, let's do this. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, you know, use the Floodfill with this guy. So let's say that in this particular case, like, you know, like what I had to do before is I had this pattern, but then I had to go and make a duplicate of the tile generator and try to, or a duplicate of a node, or try to find some other kind of trick or workaround. Because what I want to do is I want to create just like these random node values like this. And the reason why I want to do that here is this. So let's say that, you know, we're working on some planks and we have like a cracks pattern, like this is like a wood cracks pattern. And if you were to take it just like it is now and we multiply it, you get something like this. And okay, well, it kind of looks like wood planks. But if we zoom in close, you can see, well, this crack, you know, these wood cracks, they follow exactly to the next plank. Basically, it looks just like what we did. We just took an image and just multiplied it, or like almost like pasted it on top of something else. It's you know, it's weak. We don't want to do that. It looks terrible. So here you can see, you can just total pattern. This looks very procedural. So like I said, what we would do is you could use the directional warp to warp this to offset these panels. But to do that, you needed some type of variation gradient into this. And so typically what we were having to do was go in and change stuff. So one question that's been asked here is, this planks node new? It's not new. This is just something I created myself for this tutorial that I've been working on. Like I said, it's gonna come out on Substance Academy as soon as I can finally get it done. But it's not new. But I do show how to create it step by step. So like I said, I'm trying to create like a pattern like this, and I had to like go through a bunch of trouble to like do this. But now with the Floodfill, we can do this so much simpler. So example, what I'm going to do is then just add a Floodfill here. Sorry guys, that was like a huge like build up to the story just to show this effect. So we plug this into Floodfill. This is the kind of the geometry or the data that I'm getting. And so now, like I said, we showed the gradient. This time what I'm going to do is go Floodfill to random grayscale. So I'll use this option. I plug this in, and boom, there you go. I get my offset map here. So now what I could do is a directional warp. Feed this guy into here. I'm sorry. I want to feed in my cracks, and then this guy's going to be the input. And then I'll feed this in. All right, so now, whoops, I got this so messed up. Sorry, everybody. Let's see, what am I doing here? Okay, that should go here. Okay, so then this guy goes into here. Sorry, messed this up. He goes here. Okay, now we've got it. So now you can see that we have our pattern, and with this directional warp, now if I go in and start to change my value here, so we set it like, say, something like 45, you can see that I'm directionally offsetting this based on this intensity input. This intensity input was created based on the Floodfill. So like I said, we used Floodfill. We had just our pattern. I didn't have to do any duplicating nodes and all this crazy stuff that I had to do before. Just Floodfill this thing, random grayscale. Now I've got my pattern, and then do this. So now it's so much simpler to work through this. So you can see I can offset all this. Another way that I think is cool to use this, and I'll just demonstrate another Floodfill. If we come in here to Floodfill random color. So this guy here will take the Floodfill data, we'll plug it in, and now we get these random colors. Cool stuff. We could use this all kinds of different ways. But another way that I kind of used it before was just do this RGBA split. And so we'll plug this in, and now you can see that I've got my red channel gives me this version, my green channel gives me a different variation, my blue channel gives me a different variation. So it's just the way to, you know, get these luminance ranges that we may use in different ways. Maybe I use this red channel one, or here, let's do the blue channel one into here to offset my crack lines. Ah, I messed it up again. I keep doing this. He goes down here. Okay, so like I said, I can use this blue channel, and then maybe later on in my graph, I might use this green channel because I want to, like, you know, colorize, you know, darken like different panels, or multiply this over my height map to make some of these planks higher than others, and so on, you know. And so that's one way you can use this this random color version. Pretty cool. So another thing I want to show you, if we go into let's see, Floodfill, we have position. So this one, I'm going to show you this one a little bit differently. Let's do, well, here, let's just use what we have, I guess. This time we're going to take our Floodfill and plug this guy here. And so now this gives you Floodfill to position. And so basically what this is like a UV coordinate here. So the color that you see corresponds to the UV coordinate at the center of the pattern. So just to illustrate that, if I hit this image information button, we're going to get this little color widget. So let's do this. Let's look at this. See this plank right here? This is what we're going to look at. Now I'm going to try to place my mouse close to the center. And I want you to pay attention here on this X and Y. You're going to see this value. It's in it's floating points, so it's decimal. And then if we look at it, you can see that it's reading like, you know, 0.37, 0.49. And if we look at the RGB, so if you just look right over here, you'll notice that it's almost exactly the same number. So here I've got 0.37, and then the red is 0.37, and then I've got 0.51, and here the green says 0.5. You know, it's almost there, just depending on where I have this in the center. So, like I said, the color value represents basically the UV coordinate for the center of the shape, and we can use this to create, well, positional information. So here, in that case, let's try doing like a grayscale conversion here. All right, so if I do this, and let's say that I switch this here just to my green channel. Let's see. That one's not working as good. Let's do this. Tile generator. Let's do tile generator random. This will show it a little better. Whoops. All right, and I'll just create a flood fill real quick. And then we'll plug this guy into here. So we get this data. And then here, you can see that if I look at it like this, so we did position data, grayscale conversion, and on the green channel, you can see if I put my green channel in, it gives me a way to create a mask that basically, like, say I want to create a mask on these tiles when I want to maybe put some dirt that shows up on the bottom area. I can do it by just using this position. Again, if I switch this to green, you can see I can push it all the way over to one side. So now it's like you know, maybe I want to create a gradient like this or so on, or I can mix the two, or however that works. In the case of what I had here, you can see that can do, whoops, what did I do there? Let me grab this guy and plug him into here. There we go. So here you can see on the red channel, I can do that kind of the same thing where I'm just focusing on a certain area here, you know, certain direction, pulling that off of that position like this. And so that is going to be, basically covers all of our flood fill nodes. So flood, let's see, we covered pretty much everything. Now there's one node here that's extra, this bounding box. So for example, if we plug this in, this node here is basically doing the same thing that we had based on what I showed before when we had the, where is that, to the gradient? Here, let's do flood fill gradient, plug this guy in. This here. So we're multiplying this by the bounding box. So that's what this guy's doing here. Nicholas said this was a useful feature, so he thought maybe you might need it as a node or break it out as a node, so it's just a separate node. So far, I haven't really had much use for it, but it's there in case you needed it. So that covers all of the flood fill. Like we said, that's what this one was: gradient, position, random color, and random grayscale here. Let's see here. I think that's pretty much it. We're at 3:20, so I guess I'll go ahead and close it off. That covers everything that I really wanted to show. I had a huge, like, 2-page document here to run through, and so I got through every single bullet point, it looks like. So, everyone, I want to thank you guys so much. This was about an hour and 20 minutes. Thanks for hanging with me. Again, this is a huge release. A lot of really cool stuff in here. Special thanks out to the team. Nicholas, you guys did a great job. I know you guys worked really hard on this release. So, thanks. I'm sure everyone in the community is thrilled to get playing around with these nodes. And like I said, I think the flood fill is probably one of my favorite features. So, as always, please, you know, if you have any questions, check us in the forums. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to our newsletter. You know, we try to do streams like this quite often. We don't do them every week, but you know, whenever we have events and so on or new releases. Also, we're going to have some updates coming with Substance Academy, so stay tuned for information on that. One more question here. It says, okay, when's it out? If you're talking about the release, it was out yesterday, so everything's live now. Jump out there, download, and start playing away and have a lot of fun. Of course, whatever you guys create, please tweet them to us at Algorithmic. We'd love to see, you know, what kind of creations you guys do and so on. So again, thanks everybody for your time. I hope you have a great weekend coming up. Safe Halloween. I guess that's coming up here at the end of the month. So everybody have a good time, and I will see you on the next stream. Take care.